Tūranga. How are you doing?
Oh yeah, hiding away from the storm.
Yeah.
The big storm that we got going on here right now in New Zealand, up in the North Island at least, which has ruined a lot of people's long weekend camping plans. So, doesn't bother me too much. I've got interviews to do and wrap up, but just staying inside out of the weather.
Yeah. Okay, this is a bit, uh, a bit weird. We are doing this interview after another interview that we did before. So I'm asking again the same thing. So it was like, yeah, yeah. But let's get to the questions and let's talk about your last album that was released at the end of March. So, Terra.
Mhm.
Can you tell us more about this album, about the topics covered, and also about the music?
Yeah, yeah, this is great. I've got my answers were rehearsed now because we just did them for the other
Yeah,
interview. But what we tried to achieve with this third album was a combination of everything that we've released so far, and the highlights of those releases. So, because people loved the first album, and they love the songwriting and the catchiness of the songs. And then with the second album, people liked the technical improvements and the furthering of our playing as musicians, I suppose. So this was an opportunity for us to do that again and show people more of what we have and how we've improved as musicians even more. And then while also trying to find the space where people are like, oh, but the song's still catchy, and we still can sing along to it and have fun at a concert and when they come to watch us live. So um that was kind of our approach with this third album, and also as an opportunity to show people like where we're at right now, because one of the things that we find is a lot of people still think we're teenagers. They discover us by listening to the music that we released or that the band released. Sorry, that's because that's before my time. That the band released while they were teenagers. So a lot of people look at them on the music video or they read the headlines about teenagers from New Zealand and they go, oh, they must be teenagers. And so we're not. I'm 25, Henry's 25, Lewis is about to be 23. So it's like the teenage years are long gone. Um, and this album has been an opportunity for us to be like, we're not teenagers, we're here. And I think that's also important because I think for some people, the allure to the band was that we were teenagers. So, sometimes, which is a problem, because then when you're no longer teenagers, there's that moment where it's like, do people still like you? Or has the effect worn off now that you're men, you know? Um, and thankfully, this album so far has been the response that's like, oh, okay. So they're not just teenagers, and it wasn't just a one-off gimmicky thing. Here they are. They've cemented their sound, and they're here to stay. And we're here to do this for a long time. And so that's what's been really cool about this third album for us.
yeah. And I think that now it's more mature, the sound, and I think that you find your your way of doing music now. Of
Hmm.
course, for a musician, is always a evolving thing, but still, sometimes you find your way to do things. So I think that
Exactly.
now it's that.
Exactly. And that is an important thing is like trying as the creative to keep it interesting and feeling fresh and relevant to where your creative flows are at this time, but then also being aware and acknowledging that your audience like you for something specific. So you have to find this way of giving the audience what they want, the familiarity that when they listen to your music, they still go, oh yeah, it's alien weaponry. They don't want to listen to the music and go, oh, it doesn't sound like alien weaponry anymore. You don't want that, but then you don't want to give everybody the same thing every time so that you get bored or even the audience gets bored, so that can be quite a challenging balance to try and find, and especially this early in our career, we're still not even sure we're there yet, but we're closer now. This album has pushed us closer in that direction of like really truly finding our sound, and now that we've released this album and seen the response, it's given us a really good idea of which direction we want to go for number four, even though this one's only come out, we've already been talking amongst ourselves about what the next album's going to be like. So yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah, yeah. And in your songs, you use English but also Maori. I'm curious to know, in your everyday life, do you speak Maori daily?
No, no, I don't. I live in a household that doesn't speak it. So, it's very difficult to maintain the speaking a language when you're surrounded by people that don't speak that language. So sometimes when we're on tour, us band members will talk to each other in Māori because like now you're in an environment where you can speak it with people. But like the people in my immediate family, my parents, for example, don't speak Māori. So I grew up not speaking Māori. And I've had to learn it on my own. Like whether it was at school or when I went to university, I did a lot of courses to learn to speak Maori, and so I'm still learning to speak it properly. But you can't practice it without the people around you to actually speak to, and the direct people in my family, which would have been my grandparents, have all died now. That they were the ones that spoke Maori. So, the only other people now that to practice with in my immediate vicinity is Henry and Lewis, you know. But even then, they also don't speak it fully anymore. For them, it was their first language, but when they went to public schools that only speak English, it doesn't take very long to like forget a language because you're not using it anymore. So, and that's the general struggle with speaking Māori in this country is unless you live in these communities that thrive on speaking Māori, it's not a language you hear every day. You have to go to specific regions to hear Māori being spoken as a majority language. And this is not regions that we live in. So it's I've tried to like get my parents speaking, before, but much harder to learn a language when my parents are a little bit older than people would expect. My dad's 70, my mum's turning 60 in a couple of days. So um, it's a lot harder to learn a language that late in life. So their knowledge is simple. It's not that they don't speak it at all, but it's at a, very simple level. So quite difficult to maintain on day to day. I like to read books. That's how I like to keep up my practices, reading books in Māori or writing music, or listening to music is an awesome way to absorb or keep up the knowledge I have. It makes it a little hard to learn new, but it at least prevents me from losing what I already have. And then when I get the opportunity to learn something new, then I can add it to the bank and keep developing it over my life, I suppose.
Yeah. And mm, can you, I mean, talking about Maori music, can you find it easily?
It's becoming I feel like I can say this because I wasn't a part of the band when they started. But Alien Weaponry, I do think, kicked up kind of a drive for the popular. Māori music has existed for, well, forever, of course. Like before colonialism, Māori have their traditional music and performances and all that sort of stuff. But if we're talking like modern music that is being sung in Māori, there has been stuff throughout the years and some very popular songs. But I would say over the past 10 years, across the board, there's been a huge boost in bands singing or musical acts singing in Maori and acts that for most of their career didn't sing in Maori, and now it's more widely accepted to do so, so they feel more comfortable doing it. But one thing I feel like I can safely say about the band, because again, before I was a part of it, was I think they really pioneered this like new wave of singing in Maori because they were doing it quote unquote before it was accepted ish, if you know what I mean. They were
Yeah.
doing it even when people were telling them no, you should sing in English, they were still singing in Maori. Where there were other groups who, whether it was contractually or they just didn't feel confident to do so, had to still sing in English when they were being told to sing in English. And I think Alien Weaponry really like put the fist down of like, who cares, bro? Let's just, which is a very heavy metal thing to do.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
sure it's a lot harder for pop artists to make a significant change like that because of the way that their behind the scenes label system works. It's a little bit tougher. But now it's like all over the place in New Zealand. You know, so many people are singing in Maori, and which is awesome. You know, I personally don't care whether you've come to the party late, so to speak, that regardless of you've gotten there. You know, I don't care how you got there, but you've gotten there now, and now there's more people singing in Maori and releasing Maori music and getting eyes and ears on things. Maori is good for our country, you know,
Yeah.
because of all those years where we were growing up being told nobody would care about your language, nobody would care about your people. And every time now that a new musician releases a song in Maori, or we play a show for people overseas, you know, in Finland, and people in Finland are singing Maori, it proves all that wrong, you know. So I love seeing it. I don't care what genre, what facet of our country it is. I just love to see more, and not just from Maori people. You know, Lord, our well-known New Zealand pop singer, she released a whole version of one of her albums completely in Maori, you know. And as far as I'm aware, she's not Maori herself, you know. And that's cool as well, you know, and that's also important. I think that so then we don't get the idea that it's just for Maori, because that's also how the language doesn't flourish, and you know they die out because you keep it um, closed off, you know, but to share it, and there's a fine line in sharing culture, you know, you can go too far with it, but that's things like the language, I think, are an awesome place to start.
Yeah. I'm always fascinated about bands that use language that is not English. I think that every language can fit well on songs and in heavy metal. Uh, so I I would suggest to everybody to give a try if they are uncertain, because
Hmm.
it's also important, in particular for minorities. If we don't want languages die, because it's what happens when the language is not talk anymore. So what we need to do is to keep those language lives.
Exactly. And I think too, like, I think a reason it's possible now, you know, because there's a lot of bands out there now that are singing in non-English. This is not just in heavy metal, but in heavy metal, there's a lot. You got Bloodywood, you've got The Who. Obviously, Rammstein are kind of the famous ones for doing it, but I feel like German's a little different because it's already quite a popular language. You know, it's a widely spoken language, so it's not like it was some rare um and it was a European language, I should say, is why it's important because heavy metal generally being a relatively European genre, you know, so something like German isn't much of a shock as Bloodywood singing in whatever version of the Indian language they sing in. And it's awesome to see it, you know, it's awesome to see it. And I think a reason it can work so well these days is one, people have been listening to English for long enough. It's getting harder to sound different, you know. So language is one way that you can stand out. But two, it's more accessible now. You know, once upon a time, you couldn't just Google the translation of a song. So if you didn't know what they were singing about, you might have just been like, oh, well, I won't listen to them anymore, you know. But now you go, ooh, this is cool. What language are they singing in? The Who? Oh, it's Mongolian. Oh, wonder what they're talking about. The Who translated. And then you can get Google to show you what they're singing about, you know. So the internet and things like that has also made the language you don't understand, you're able to understand it, you know, more so than you were 20, 25 years ago, you know. So I think that's another big reason for the boom now, and more accessibility for people to be able to sing in their native languages. You know, there's a band from New Zealand that we love, heavy metal band, Shepherd's Rain. They like us, but they do it for Samoan. So they sing in Samoan language instead, you know. And that's really awesome to see as well. Particularly for fans of Alien Weaponry, we just had them on our last tour, and it's another great example of being able to sing in a different language, you know,
Yeah.
because you can just Google it now.
Yeah, I'm wondering now, because in the northern part of Finland, Sweden, and a part of Russia, there is this population called the Sami,
Yes.
and I don't think that there is any. metal band that used the Sami language. So that will be cool. I remember that at some point I was like kind of invest in learning about this culture. I'm not Finnish, so for me it was interesting to see that they have their own tradition and their own
Yes.
language. So everything that it's kind of different from what I have around feels more interesting in a way.
Hmm.
So it makes me curious to know more.
And that's what exactly what we want, you know. And I think that's a another reason bands that represent these cultures around the world are able to thrive now is because people are now exposed because of the internet again. They're exposed to more culture than they would have been once upon a time, you know, because that's, of course, why things like racism and prejudice and negative stereotypes all harbor is because it's foreign. You don't know anything about it. And the human nature is that they're afraid of things they don't understand, you know. So when it comes to moko, for example, they look at a face tattoo and they go, whoa, what the heck? And then you just have to explain, like, oh, look, it's this. And then I don't know, 9 times out of 10, people are going to go, oh, oh, that's not so scary or whatever, you know. And so a lot of the time it's just that people just they just don't have the understanding or the education about these things, and so they don't know how to feel about it yet, you know. And so that's another awesome thing about being able to share culture through music is it allows people to break down these stereotypes or these misunderstandings or maybe racial prejudices towards certain groups because of the ability to be exposed to it now. You know, where once upon a time you may have never seen a Maori person in your life, except for what you read in some book written by a white guy, you know? So it's like, in that book's like, oh, the savages that tattoo their faces, you know? And so, of course, you're going to go, oh, yeah, they sound pretty scary. But you're being told about a people from somebody else. So it's, yeah, I think it's cool now being able to expand and broaden people's horizons.
Yeah, yeah, true. What can you tell about your moko?
Yeah, so for anyone that doesn't know what moko is, it's the unique to Maori. It is the Maori traditional markings, and they can represent a lot. One quirk about them is that every single one is unique. So there's no two moko that look exactly the same, and they are designed to represent an individual, their family, and their life achievements. It can be anywhere on the body too. So I have moko all over my arms and my stomach, and but what we're most famous for is the face, the facial markings, you know, which has been a tradition. Well, Maori have been in New Zealand for a thousand years. So as long as we've been here, I suppose it's been a thing. But of course, Polynesian peoples like are big tattooers, you know. So all across the Pacific Ocean, a lot of the cultures have their own unique form of traditional tattooing, you know, and that's where the word tattoo comes from, is the Polynesian word tatou, you know. So um we did it so much, it's why the English word for tattoo is taken from the Polynesian language. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And talking about metal music in New Zealand, um, how is the scene there?
It's growing for sure. New Zealand's one of those funny ones where it's like if Slipknot come to play here, you know, they're just as big here as they are anywhere else. They could still sell out a big venue and, you know, play the arenas and the whole thing. But the New Zealand support for the local scene is a little interesting, because like a lot of the time you find like the New Zealand metal scene is either that Slipknot. I don't want to use the word commercial, but you know, Slipknot's a popular band. It's a popular band. Or then it's very extreme metal. You know, so like there's like two ends of the spectrum sort of thing. So, um, one thing that's really awesome to see though is like now there's a lot more like younger people like getting into metal, and I would have to, you know, pin that onto bands like Sleep Token and Spirit Box that are like have sort of knocked loose even, you know, that are like kickstarting this new wave of metal fans and youth, you know, because like for a lot of the time when we would play in New Zealand, a lot of our audience was like older than us, you know. But this recent tour that we just finished a month ago here in New Zealand, now a lot of the audience are like our age or younger, you know, which is really awesome to see. Now maybe it's because they're actually old enough to come to the shows. A lot of our shows in New Zealand are 18 because of the bar laws, the alcohol laws. So it's like maybe a lot of them were already fans as kids, but now they're old enough to actually come to the shows and stuff. So that's really awesome to see. And I think this is gonna be a kind of a new wave of metal passion here in New Zealand. And I feel like social media and these bands that are blowing up on social media are to thank for that, you know.
Yeah, that's great to hear because at some point I felt like that younger people were not into metal, but great to hear that at least there in New Zealand people are
Yeah.
showing up and getting into metal music.
Yeah, it's awesome as, on this last tour we've had like they just finished high school. This is my first concert I've ever been to, and they're like in the front row going crazy, and it's like awesome to see that youthful energy like going crazy in a pit at one of our shows, you know.
Yeah, yeah. And talking about metal in general, so how did you get into metal music?
For me, it was I was at 12 years old, and I always loved music. But I did not grow up on heavy metal music. My family was a Motown, Stevie Wonder, Michael Jackson type household. And that's why Michael Jackson to this day is still my favorite musician of all time. Um, and then when I was in high school, I was interested in playing the guitar. I'd been playing piano since I was 6 years old. I was classically trained pianist, so that's the sort of music that I was playing. I was also I still am. I'm a huge fan of film. I'm more a fan of film than I am a fan of music. So some of my favorite music growing up was film scores, and Hans Zimmer, John Williams, all these legends in the film score world were my idols like growing up. And that was the sort of music I gravitated towards. And then when I was about 11, I was kind of like, I kind of want to play guitar, I like the idea of playing multiple instruments because it expanded my opportunities for what I could play and styles that I could play to improve myself as a musician. And I was in the music room one day hanging out with my mates, and we had a friend who was a really great guitar player. And his family was like they couldn't afford an electric guitar. I'll put it like that. And I walk into the music room one day and he's got this acoustic guitar and he's playing this riff. And I was like, what the heck is that? You know? And he's like, oh, it's this band called Trivium. And I was like, oh my God, I need to hear that. And it's very specifically because to this day, it's not only one of my favorite riffs of all time, but it's the riff that got me into heavy metal. It was the pre-chorus riff in the song Forsake Not the Dream by Trivium on the In Waves album. And he's playing this thing on an acoustic guitar. So I didn't know what to expect when he pulls the song up on YouTube. He goes, oh, dude, this is a great band. You got to check this band out. And then, of course, it's like full blown Trivium and not at all like an acoustic guitar. And I was like, had my face melted off in school. And I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. I need to learn this. So I was like, I'm definitely going to play guitar now. So I started playing guitar, and like I started playing like Guns N' Roses and that kind of music, the kind of rock and roll. That was like I was transitioning into this like heavier music. And then Trivium was the switch that like, and then I got obsessed and I was like obsessed with Trivium and then like All That Remains and Avenged Sevenfold in that era and Slipknot. And they were like the four bands that I listened to exclusively. And then actually I've discovered a lot more heavy metal since joining Alien Weaponry because um, I loved heavy metal as a guitar player, but it wasn't really a genre that I listened to, Like, so even when I joined the band, they were like, we're going to go on tour with Gojira. And I was like, who's that? Um, all these bands that had no idea about, and everyone was like, "How the hell are you in a heavy metal band and you don't know these bands?" And I was like, "Because I didn't really listen to heavy metal. I listened to a few heavy metal bands because I like their guitar playing, And then my knowledge has like expanded so much now since being in the band, of course. And it's like I've fallen in love with so many bands. Like right now, I think speaking of Spirit Box, like Mike Stringer, their guitar player, is just one of the best metal songwriting guitar players on the scene right now. And um, we had the pleasure of seeing them at Hellfest actually, my first time that I played there. And there's so many awesome bands out there that are like killing at the speed from Australia. The hardcore band from Australia, which is close to home for us as well. So it's awesome to see a band with on this side of the world thriving. Um, so it's been awesome, like diving so much further into heavy metal since I was a 12-year-old boy listening to my mate play Trivium on an acoustic guitar. But that was the beginning of it all. That's what
Yeah,
kickstarted it all. And
yeah,
that riff even, has inspired my songwriting a lot. Actually, speaking of that song and that riff, A Thousand Friends. A lot of people when A Thousand Friends came out, they were like, "Wow, this is very Trivium," and they liked it, which was good. But that song was very, very heavily a homage to that era
yeah,
of metalcore and specifically Trivium. Like I wrote the guitars for that song, and a lot of it was as a to pay homage to Trivium and specifically Forsake Not the Dream. It gets
yeah,
pretty close sometimes. We were like, "Oh, is this too on the nose?" But people like it. But that's why,
yeah,
it is on purpose. Because everyone's like, "Well, this is out of nowhere," and I was like, because this was my first album with Alien Weaponry, that was my chance to be like, this is a acknowledgement of the bands that put me in this position today.
yeah, yeah. So put your influences on that.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. But let's get to the question that was left to the Instagram post. So let's get there. So we have Bear the Wise Man that ask, what is the best alien weapon?
The best alien weapon. Funnily, I've actually been asked this before, and I still
Okay.
think it's the energy sword from Halo. I feel like that's such an iconic sci-fi alien weapon. That I don't think there's any that even come close. I think Halo could be a lot. You could take anything from the Halo weapon arsenal out of those video games, but I think the energy sword is like number one iconic.
Yeah. And now it's time for the jar.
The jar.
Jar, the infamous jar. So let's see. Topic one is Disney. Are you into Disney?
Ah, yes. So because I'm a fan of film, what I was actually doing before I joined Alien Weaponry was I was in university to be an animation student. So like my
Okay.
passion for film was actually where I was trying to go with my job before I joined the band, and most specifically because of animation, which I fell in love with because of Disney, of course. So, and animated films are still my favorite films of all time. So, and I've talked a lot about Disney on my social media because a lot of people are curious about Moana, which of course is a Disney animated film, but it centers around a Polynesian perspective and these Polynesian characters. Yeah.
Yeah. What's your favorite Disney movie?
I've always been a fan of Aladdin. I always loved Aladdin, the Aladdin movies. I think Robin Williams' Genie is like one of the greatest voice acted characters like ever put to screen. Um, that's excluding the second Aladdin because that's where they changed it. But the first Aladdin and then the King of Thieves were the ones that Robin Williams was in. Also, Prince of Egypt
Yeah.
is, I think that's one of those ones where it's like you almost watch it and you kind of forget that it's like a kids movie. That movie's so heavy and so serious, and the music in that movie is a masterpiece. And
Yeah.
of course, it's a biblical story setting. So some people may not be keen on it because of the religious affiliation, but I think it lends itself to the grandeur of that film is so beautiful, and the way that movie was animated is so beautiful that
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
are up there.
And I love all the music that is used in the Disney movies. They
Ah, I,
they are so amazingly done.
the best, and actually I think like if we're gonna talk modern Disney, Coco. is a
Oh, yeah.
masterpiece of a film in the music and the story, the animation, the whole thing. And actually, I went to the premiere of. There's been a group of people who have been dubbing Disney movies in Maori. And I was invited to the premiere of the Coco Te Reo Maori version, so there's like all these versions of Disney movies that you can now watch in the Maori language, so for anyone who's keen to like hear it or learn the language, like you can go and listen to a lot of these Disney movies now in Maori. And what was really cool about the Coco one is obviously that movie in particular had great music. And Spanish pronunciation wise is quite similar to Maori. So throughout the movie, the songs that are like sung in Spanish, they now sing them like half in Spanish, half in Maori, and it's really cool seeing these two languages like fuse together so well. It makes you almost want to make like a Spanish song in Maori, or because they
Yeah.
like that works so well.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. I need to check out the Maori version then. Somewhere for sure I can find it.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure like you can pick it as a language in Disney Plus's, like
Yeah.
audio thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool though.
Yeah. But now we have not much time left for this interview. So let's get to the most important thing in the world, that is pizza.
Ah, yes.
Do you like pizza?
I do. I do like pizza. Actually, I have a ritual with my girlfriend. She lives in Los Angeles, so I travel over there quite a lot, and we had this sort of ritual where the first night that I get there, we have pizza for dinner. And it's like because I don't get a lot of pizza where I live. I have to kind of travel far for it, and obviously Los Angeles, you can get whatever you want. So it's always like, what do you want to eat? And the first night I ever visited, it was like, oh, I really feel like pizza, and then we just kind of made it a thing. So now every time I go, it's like we eat pizza.
Yeah. What's your favorite pizza?
For me, it's any of the like plain ones. So whether it's like the like cheese or four cheese, any cheese ones, or just margarita has always been like my just any of those simple. I don't really like the ones that are covered in stuff and covered in meat or whatever, those sorts of ones. I just like those real
Yeah,
plain,
yeah,
simple
yeah.
pizza.
I also go always with, well, I tend in Finland, I take just margherita, but when I'm in Italy, because I'm from Italy, then I want the margherita plus olives and then stracchino cheese that it's not something that you can find everywhere in the world. So
Right.
I think that it gives that kick.
Yes. No, yeah, and I would have to agree. I think those simple plain ones have always. I've tried all the fancy, tried a whatever, whatever. Although I actually did a promotional video for a New Zealand pizza chain called Hell's Pizza, and they released. I think it was last year. It was a hangi pizza, and hangi is a traditional Maori food that is cooked in the ground. And so you like cook all this food on like hot rocks and then you bury it in the dirt and it's like a giant slow cooker essentially. And it's one of the like traditional Maori dishes. And Hell's Pizza last year, I'm pretty sure it was last year, released like a hangi pizza. So they cooked all the food all under the ground or whatever and then put it on a pizza. And that was quite interesting, That was
Yeah,
one that I was like, this is a different,
something
like
new.
really different, kind of new. And I was like, interesting. And I kind of like the way it mixed with the dough of pizza. But that's like a very smoky food, because of the way it's cooked.
Yeah.
It's quite a specific taste. And I think it was kind of nice on the pizza, but not something I would eat all the time too, because it was a heavy pizza.
Taste.
And that's one
Oh,
thing, like, because it's got like potatoes and pumpkin and things on it, where it's like, because it's just everything you would get in a hangi smacked on a pizza. So it's all like dense foods, which is why I've always liked the plain cheese or margaritas. It's like, because
yeah.
the dough does all the heavy lifting for the like sustenance of the pizza.
What do you think about pineapple on pizza? Does it belong?
For me, I don't care, I think it's sweet. Um, I think it adds a element to the pizza that like I don't hate. I think it's one of those things where it's like I'm much more opposed to the meats on pizza. Like for me, it's like meat on pizza is like I always think it never tastes nice. Maybe it's the type of meat too that because the way it is with pizza, it's like it's never the nicest pieces of meat. So, and then I never liked that they're like one of the things that, and this is always my hot take for pizza that people go, "What is pepperoni?"
Not
Because I
your thing.
don't like when you bite it and then you just end up pulling the whole thing off it instead of because it's such a tough dried meat. You know, you just bite the bit and then you pull the whole thing off and then you're left with like an empty spot. And I'm like, oh, it's just such a muck around sort of addition to, and that's what I don't like about meats on pizza. You know, where like the pineapple, it's just you're gonna get it in the bite. It's there, it's sweet, it's whatever. You know, I don't really care too much. It's not the pizza that I'm picking. Again, it's not on my favorite
Yeah,
pizzas,
yeah,
but I would much rather eat the Hawaiian pizza before I eat meat lovers.
yeah. So now we have 3 minutes left, and I have the question, and then you need to leave a question for the next guest. So the question is, what kind of pizza do you eat in New Zealand, and why are you eating that stuff and not something good? It was an Italian asking, so
Ah, yes. Well, actually, I feel like our pizza in general is like it's the chain stuff, Pizza Hut, Domino's, those sorts of things that you expect. That New Zealanders love meat lovers pizzas. Like that's like I would feel like, which I don't, And so every time I'm somewhere where they're like, oh, it's pizza party or pizza vanilla, it's like meat lovers, meat lovers, meat lovers. I'm like, nah, bro, I'll go get my own pizza. I just want cheese. I just want margarita. Or in the unique circumstances, it's a hangi pizza. So
yeah.
that's a very uniquely New Zealand pizza that you can't get anywhere else.
So now it's your turn to leave a question for the next guest.
Yeah, so I guess because I love movies, I feel like the question should be like, what do you think is the greatest movie soundtrack or score of all time? What movie has the
One.
best music in it?
Yeah, nice one. So let's see what the next guest will answer.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, but thank you so much. It was a pleasure to have you here, and I hope that you will be my guest also in the future in this Metal Pizza podcast. Uh, would you like to say something to people that are watching or listening this?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, thank you for having me on the chat for two. Where we know for
Yeah,
everyone listening, we've done two interviews today together on separate, platforms. But yeah, thank you everyone out there who has listened to the album already, and whether you're a new fan or an old fan, thank you so much for sticking around and supporting us. And we can't wait to get out on the road. Stay tuned for tour date announcements, and hopefully we come to a city or a country near you very soon. We got a lot. We got to get out there. We're looking forward to playing these songs for everyone. So, and if you haven't listened to it, go listen to
now,
it now.
thank you.